Okay, good afternoon. I am Enzo Budiarjo. Welcome to Monday Live. This is something that we do every Monday afternoon to try and figure out the future for things. It's great to see you here today. Just in case you're wondering who we are, our profiles are listed on mondaylive.org. As a reminder, views expressed here are personal, not of any company or organization, and let's make use of that chat, the Zoom chat, to make this interactive. And if you want anything on this slide deck, it's available on mondaylive.org. So this being April, we're in the middle of talking about ontologies for buildings. We had a great start last week, so we'll continue that. So after our sort of news and trends, we'll talk about ontology in buildings, and we want to talk about the sort of the intersection between ontology and AI and how they play with each other. Are they complement? Do they conflict? Do they help? Et cetera, et cetera. That should be a conversation. But before that, as always, I'm going to hand it over to Ken. What's going on, Ken?
Thanks, Anto. As always, lots of stuff going on. Up there in the top left-hand corner, we've got Gimon, and these guys are relentless. And it's good to see our contributing editors interacting and sharing their experiences. That links to them in a Zen garden, so you can see they're definitely heading off in another direction. But I think their underlying message is great. Is just get on with this AI transition and sort of learn as we go, and even earn your living as you go, which some good stuff happening there.
Yeah,
the one below that
yeah,
is
I got my resistance is futile shirt on too in honor of the
good
that was
going.
a lot of
That's good going.
lot
Anyway,
of fun there. Thanks.
Great stuff. Okay, then the summary below that is our summary of last week's session, and I think that came out well. We've got a definition of the group that Anto's putting together here to bring together all of the folks that are in this area, and yeah, just good stuff there. I think he's going to give us some more on the Tagger team, and I'm interested to hear exactly how that's coming together as well.
Rick will speak to that. Rick will speak to that after.
Because that's a significant movement, I think, in the industry, and it's going to have some changes in the industry, and it also is going to make it easier for AI to get at our data. The one below that, Kelly put together for April 9th was IoT Day. And this is a international holiday that started way back when for IoT, and then they've appended AI to that, which of course AI gets appended to everything. But we wrote this article, and this whole self-tuning, seeing AI is starting to now get involved in our control algorithms, and I think Keith has been a leader in that, making that kind of stuff happen. So, but there's others that are heading in that direction, and it's just a new revolution that's occurring. The other thing we did is we linked that to the IoT Day, and that got it circulated globally around the world. And also I appended to it the one above it, the ontology. So then we've got our message carried out to the world. I was a bit late on that, and I was kind of cobbling all that together in the last moments, as one does with all of this stuff these days. Sometimes you wonder if you're planning or just trying to catch up. At the bottom there, the free radical rebels driving the change in facilities. I think that's a really good article. Danielle digs out her chemistry past and talks about free radicals and how they basically change the process. And so we need to identify who are the free radicals in our industry and how can we help them and motivate them. Just keeping going down there, creating reasoning queries. I thought that was an interesting one with OpenAI. Just keep going across the bottom there. This AI is this AI is becoming a thing. And now we have training sessions. Oxford, you can actually get a degree in this, and also just take some online courses. One that I thought of as interest is the autonomous AI agents, and learning that. The one above it is interesting as well. I kind of like just the graphic, just that robot picking us up by the neck and shaking us and potentially dropping us in the waste bin. Does have a lot of impact. And I think that's something we can kind of focus on, is in a do-nothing situation, you will become replaceable. Being active and doing everything you can to usher in the AI era, I think you're solid. Right beside that, we've got this onion that turned into a building, and it caught my attention because they basically used AI to architecturally create some pretty futuristic buildings. And that just shows you the flexibility and the imagination. Maybe that's the word I'm looking for. Back in the old days, we used to say, if you could imagine it, you could do it. And now we've got AI imagining stuff. So all of a sudden, we've just got a gigantic leap in imagination. And I think it's going to egg us on to better things. And then the one just above that is we're a media sponsor of the Smart Building Show in London and in October. And they're looking for speakers and for sponsors and stuff too. So that's just a plug for them. We think it's a good fit. They're doing a good job of covering Europe, and we're probably a little more known in North America. So, and I think that's it. Back to you, Anto.
Thank you, Ken. Lots of stuff going on as always. Last week saw the kickoff of the Semantic Tiger team. I'm gonna hand it over to Rick to give us a bit of a debrief on what happened last Friday.
Yeah, I would say that we had a really successful kickoff of the initial Tiger team, and the objective, we are going to try and clarify, make sure everybody understands why we're doing this. But I think everybody that was actively involved understands the value of ontologies and the value that we can bring by normalizing some of the disparate ontology work that's being done, to be able to clarify for all stakeholders, what the gaps are, what the overlaps are, what the purpose of ontologies are in general. But this first kickoff on Friday, there were, I think, 39 people that joined, and Parastu and Jory, who I think we've talked about before, they were the co-chairs of it and did a great job of giving almost everybody a chance to express their opinions of what, or their updates of what they're working on, and how what they're working on, perhaps can be normalized to what some of the other folks are working on. And without getting hopes up too high, it just really seems like there's going to be a great opportunity for additional clarity, some gaps to be filled in, some additional work to be done. But you could look at the list of the who's who of the industry that's been working on things, and you see some listed on the screen right now. But of 39 people, it was a lot of the right people to be able to kick this off and express what their project is doing. And we had Brian Frank, and we had Troy Harvey, and we had Joel Bender, and Kimon was on there, Dennis Sheldon, Brian Turner didn't get to speak, but we were trying to call on you there, Brian. Andrew Rogers, Eric Wallen, Marco Bertoni, Gabe Fierro. It was Tracy Markey. Who am I forgetting to mention? But Matt Holler. I'm looking at the screen caps of it all. But it was, of course, I forgot to mention Albert Putnam. Is he on? I like to give him a hard time. But everybody had a chance to hear some of the principles of some of these different organizations. I think we heard a lot of promise for what could be, future working groups and or coordination of some of these experts. And it was generally a really positive thing.
Jim, Tracy, do you want to chime in with some comments? You were both on that call.
I can start. First, it was first call, first of all, so there was a lot of introduction in who we are and what we do and background information from all the stakeholders involved with the conversation, which to me was incredibly informative because I really didn't know half of those things even existed. So already way ahead of the game just by participating. So I think in right at the end, kind of interesting, there were a few comments made by some of the members about being careful that we make sure the output is something that's useful and needed and not repeating, something else that's already been done in the past. So it was an interesting little kind of set of suggestions for guardrails here as we move forward on that, which I think was good input too. So I'm looking forward to really pulling all this together. Everyone seemed really enthusiastic about it. So now though the work begins, we'll see how that piece of it actually goes forward. So it's a lot of cats to herd there in that group.
Yeah, I thought it was an exceptionally strong start. I think it's exciting. It's also a lot of work in a short period of time. And as Tracy just said, a lot of cats to herd. So we'll just have to see how we can all contribute to it and move it forward. But I thought it was an excellent start. And, if we can keep everybody focused on the mission over the course of the short timeline, I think it'll be good.
Rick,
Yeah.
did anyone try and encourage Google representative with their DBO ontology to
We
join you
did.
guys?
They were on the list
Okay.
of the invites. Sabine was on the list, but she's no longer working for Google. So
Okay.
Yeah, they're absolutely. So there's some folks like that that we're trying to encourage, and with the group that did show up, it's just the networking effect of, oh, you should have been on this, or we got to find somebody to fill in this piece was great. We'll say that I was most excited about the involvement of the BIM. So from a design and construction standpoint, to be able to just start to be able to articulate how the intersection with BIM is going to be important for us, our data, their data, and some of the work that was being done there was really encouraging to learn about. So if we can identify any other gaps in contributors, that's one of the first things we're trying to do this week, and then make sure that the objectives of all of this are clear as well. But it was clear that the enthusiasm and the interest was definitely there.
yeah, I was on the call obviously, and the enthusiasm was very, very clear. And there was a lot of alignment. There's a lot of people saying that we need to figure this out quickly and get on with actually getting the benefit out of it. So very, very positive, and it's the first call. So we'll get an update next week, right, Rick?
Definitely.
Cool. The links as normal. Other thoughts from anyone? Hearing nothing, so let's talk about ontology. And I don't have any slides to set this up. I figure that we should just be able to talk about this because we talked about AI last month, right? We spent a whole month talking about AI, and now we're talking about ontology. So we should be able to find the links. So what is the relevance here? Is this a good thing? Is this going to naturally fit, or are we going to have to find ways of making it fit? Or anyone who want to start? In terms of whether ontology, let me put it specifically. Is ontologies useful for AI?
So another way to look at that is, do ontologies still matter with the advent of AI, right? Because that's the question I was struggling with. I was kind of on the bandwagon that, well, they really won't matter much going forward, and their usefulness will disappear as AI becomes smarter and smarter. And I've changed my position a little bit on that after kind of researching this a little bit more and thinking about it. It may be somewhat true, but I think that they still matter. And there's a couple of really kind of key points about that. So, you know, AI needs clean, structured data, for instance. Ontologies help build that part. You know, it was pretty clear with the call the other day, the Tiger Team call, interoperability doesn't happen magically, right? Everybody has a different view and take on interoperability at, you know, the different layers of the protocol stack. There's work that needs to be done, and definitional work that needs to be done at the front end of this. And then, you know, one of the things I think that ontologies really help is they help explain data and what's going on, make it more audible over time, give it context. So I think as long as humans are involved with controls and doing all of this piece of it and having to interpret outcomes, ontology will be kind of a key part of that, right? Describing what it is that's going on here in more human terms that we can relate to, that are specific to our industry. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I agree with that, Tracy. I think the ontology is more of a lens for the humans to interact with the AI. I think the AI is much more advanced and capable than that. Like, it doesn't need structure. In fact, one of its strengths is actually dealing with unstructured data and structuring it like that. I'm actually using like ChatGPT to, you know, quantify and structure point names. Like, I dump in a bag of points and it separates it by equipment type just off the point name and all that stuff. Like, I'm doing that right now. So I remember, kind of a goofy analogy, but I saw this movie called Her, where this guy was carrying on an affair with an AI agent. And at the end of the movie, like, the AI had quickly outgrown their relationship capacity. It was actually boring to the AI agent. It's like, are you having an affair on me? And she was like, I'm having 50,432 simultaneous relationships. I just can't deal with the speed at which it hurts me. So like, she actually started having an affair on him, left him, and then ran off with 50,000 other AI bots. So I mean, I think that's the way we're kind of looking at it. Like, I always say, like, we're like these little ant brains, almost like trying to make sense of something that the human mind can't make sense of. So I think, yeah, ontologies are good. They're necessary, but for us, the AI doesn't need them.
Just to echo, I think both points. Unfortunately, to Keith's point, ontologies is the part that helps bridge what the AI is doing back to us, right? Back to humans. Because at the end of the day, I got to go find that thermostat or that pump or that chiller or whatever it is that I'm focused on. And unfortunately, in our world, we deal with ontological references to those things. You know, that's how I can help find what specifics are we talking about. So I see it more as not a need for AI, it's more as a bridge back to the real world, right?
In the way we communicate with AI.
Well, then the way that we communicate between each other, between people, right?
Right, yes.
When I start talking about a thermostat, I have some ontology that defines that thermostat that you and I or Keith can talk to.
A hierarchy.
A
Yeah,
hierarchy.
it's
There you
an
go.
interface.
Relationship. Yeah.
Yep.
But it's a tool that is used for people. Back to Keith's point, it's the tool that we have to use to talk to each other about that device or thing, or that's the only tool we've got to use to talk to each other about it. To Keith's point, AI can. There was another good one, right? There was another example of that where they had two AI bots talking to each other. They ended up inventing their own language to make it more efficient, a language that the inventors couldn't even understand because they felt that our tokenized word-based language was an hindrance, a hindrance.
Identical twins, strangely enough, do the same thing.
Yeah, right.
I'm an identical twin. So when I was 2 and 3, my mom and dad said we had our own twin language that we sit there and, they didn't know what we were saying, but we understood,
But you did it for efficiency is what I've heard this
yeah.
the same, right? And then twins do it because of efficiency, because,
we didn't know how to speak this other language.
Are we saying ontologies are a stepping stone until AI gets more widely used? Or they will always be a need for
I put it in the
let's say a common
same.
ontology.
I put it in the same camp as that we're probably not going to replace spoken language, right? English or whatever, because that's the only commonality we have to communicate to each other. The AI doesn't need English. In fact, it doesn't, right? It tokenizes the whole thing to begin with. In fact, it finds the English language to be, or any language to be, an encumbrance.
Yeah.
And that's why it does the tokenization process.
So
yeah, I treat it more as the language we have to use.
Yeah. So Anno and Keith in particular. So last week when we were trying to find the word itself, ontology, what is it? And then how does it relate to our industry? The emphasis was on relationships. What are the relationships between this point and the relevance to where it is in the facility, relevance perhaps to the users and so on, right? So could the argument be made that the efforts that have gone into developing things like Haystack and Brick was really the first generation or attempt to take and normalize, if you will, point naming in a manner that it could be more easily recognized by anybody, as opposed to the technician or engineer who dreamed up the point names to begin with, because you couldn't even recognize necessarily what the point name was for. Okay, so the tags gave us a means to do that, but in and of itself, it doesn't really create some implied relationships if you're knowledgeable enough about the building, but it's not obvious. Okay, so I'm just suggesting that the ontology is the next step in that process, to where it now tries to it adds this added context around the tags on the point name, so you can identify what the point is all about, right? What it does, where it is, how it's being used, all the relationship type of information, right? So in effect, it becomes the next generation of tagging as we described it under Brick and Haystack. But to the point that I've been hearing from a number of you guys, is AI doesn't necessarily need that to do its job, which is fine. But when we're designing a building, or we're dealing with the facilities people, or we're dealing with the contractors, they are going to benefit from an ontological description of what's there, because now we can have meaningful discussions about what this data is all about, because it adds the necessary context into what was originally just a point name or a data point, however you want to describe it. Yes, no, maybe. I see Arno shaking his head.
Yeah, no,
Yes.
no, that's where I'm at, Steve. I'm at the same point, right? It's the,
Yep.
it's the, the English version of what the AI is talking about, but we as people need that ontology so we know that you and I are talking about the same thing, right? Not me, you, and the AI bot. Just when you and I are talking about it, but to make sure I'm not talking French and you're talking English and we don't understand each other in some ways. But yeah, no, that's where I'm at.
Okay.
Brian, Brian's joined us. He was on the Tiger team last week, and he was not given the opportunity to speak because we didn't have enough time. It was just a kickoff. So what's your thoughts about all of this, and specifically AI and ontology as we're talking about today?
Yeah, I mean, I
Floor's
think first of all, I'm on the camp that ontologies will exist for the foreseeable future for all of us, and even the youngest in our industry right now, not just in our industry, but broadly. I mean, take it back to something as simple as kind of accepted and adopted as a wolf versus a dog. So very similar feature sets, without all of the context about it and the ontological things about it and the taxonomy about how we describe all these different things, AI wouldn't be useful either, right? And so you bring that to our industry and it's like, okay, well, AI can look at this collection of points, doesn't know what they are per se, but watches patterns and goes, oh, hey, I think if we change this, this could happen. But what happens when AI wants to say, this thing is broken and it should be replaced? Well, in order for it to be really effective, it has to know what that thing is, whether it's going to send a robot to fix it or whether it's going to send a human. It has to know actually what it is. And I think that's where ontologies have become very powerful. And it's not about the language it's spoken about. It's not English or French, it doesn't matter. But what is this thing? It's given that thing an identity. And once it has an identity, then all kinds of things are possible with humans, and obviously with AI that can do it at millions and millions of times faster than humans can. So I think I think it's a silly question to say, will ontologies still be around? Of course they will. AI is going to continue to use that information to, one, run analytics, data analysis around everything it's doing faster than we ever could. But then it's also going to be able to communicate back to us what we need to do about it. Right. And I think, and then of course, human to human, we need it. But I think human to AI and AI to human, it's got to be there. And even AI to AI eventually.
Sort of
I was
human.
up to you. I was with you, Brian, until you said the AI to AI. And
well, so I think a robot. So think of the Waymo, right? So without knowing what streets are and grids are and all of those things, how would it know where to go? It just doesn't just decide. It's got to know all of the context, everything around it. What is what? You're talking about. It's got to know what a person is versus a dog. It's got to know, what a street light is, what a Amazon truck that just stopped in the middle of the road, and how that differs from a car that's parallel parked. There's just, or I mean, parked, double parked. And is that thing going to move? The Amazon truck's going to move. Is that thing that's double parked going to move? There's all sorts of things that it has to know about. And that's not just because we're humans that it has to know those things. It has to know that because it's just dealing with information. It doesn't actually have human input unless it gets stuck in the, somebody in Singapore has to, drive it out of there with a joystick.
I think we have to be careful not to lump all applications into one superset, though. So yeah, that's true. If you're driving a car autonomously in a physical world, you need all that. But if you're optimizing a truck route for part deliveries on a virtual map, you don't need all that stuff. It's just a vector. So we have to be careful. And I love your analogy on the fixing stuff. I mean, that's why we're 80% optimization. Yeah. So yeah, if we were using our AI to fix stuff, yeah, we would have to have some context about what that thing is in order to fix it. But as far as optimization of a process, it's just a number cruncher. Our AI doesn't even know
that is true. That's true.
Yeah. It has no idea. It could be a rocket ship. It was fighting crime 20 years ago.
Yeah, no, and I was answering the question of our ontologies.
Yeah.
So I was giving the examples of why, but I agree with 100%.
For that, for your purpose, yes, that you were, but yeah, it's not for all applications of AI. AI does not need.
Yeah, no, we're setting, yeah, you're adjusting set points
Well, that
regardless
more,
of
yes.
what is actually there. You're just looking at process and automatically determining, oh, this set point could be higher or could be lower.
Parameter, yeah, it's a number cruncher. It
Right.
doesn't matter that it's a set point. It doesn't even care.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
It's a number cruncher. It's a correlation engine.
Yeah.
So this sounds very similar to, in a way, what Ken's been talking about the last few months about our relationship to AI, is that we are AI's fingers, or I don't think Ken was using those words, but we are the thing that is AI has to have to reach things and to touch physical things. Right. And in a way, what we're saying is that that's where ontology is key to AI, because that's how it knows that what's where and what to do about things and who has what, etc.
Correct.
It's the relationship of the things and the people outside of the AI space. Is that
Well,
kind of it?
it's a no, but my challenge is that relation, and I'll use Brian's example, right, of the routing a truck through streets, right? We need street names because street names are what we reference things with, right?
For example,
That's our ontology, and there's a relationship between the streets. There's a freeway, and then off the freeway comes this street, and that's how we know streets. From a auto driving, it doesn't need to know any of that ontological. It can actually go through and vectorize all that stuff without having any ontology we force on it. It'll actually end up creating its own ontology internally to do that optimization, right? In fact, in some context, our ontological force on it might not be optimized, right, for it. So it might go off and do its own one. But at the end of the day, it still has to come back and put it in front of a human and go, turn left here, turn right here at this point in time. Now you move the next step and you take the driver out of the loop like Waymo. I have no idea what Waymo's telling itself to go to do.
well, I doubt it's looking at the street name and
Not
making
looking at street name. No,
it's not looking at the street name.
No, it's coordinates and routes. But I mean, when you get to the thing about we need this thing to be replaced,
Right.
that thing has to have an identity. It can't just have a digital ID, right? And so and again, will ontologies be around for a long, very, very long time? And if they're not around, I don't know how humans would be involved. That's a science fiction.
I think that's the key point there,
that's
right?
the point.
Is that
that's the whole point. Yeah,
that's the whole point. What you're saying is, I think we're in final agreement, right? Ontology is going to be around as long as people are around.
Yeah.
Take the people out of the loop.
Coming back to Brian's point about AI to AI, there's no reason an AI can't create its own ontology around something and share that with another AI agent, right?
Which it might think is a lot more efficient than any ontology we design.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The way we're thinking about ontology right now has to do with humans, right? An ontology is almost like an API between humans and AI at this point, right? It's how we understand and communicate back and forth with one another. But there will be a point where there's less of that needed, or there'll be a more efficient way to handle things, I think, for sure. And that's the whole point of this, right?
I'd like to jump in here, because another thing is AI has the ability to communicate with us in yet another language, a language of graphics and pictures. And if you kind of think about the Uber thing or the streets and stuff, is all that kind of disappears because it gives us a picture on the screen that we can relate to. And it's also, it doesn't matter our language model, that picture is worth 1,000 words and a video is worth 1,000,000 words. So the fact that it may be able to coax us into an in-between language, I think, is an interesting concept.
Well, it's communicating that way to us because we asked it to, right? If AI had its druthers, we'd get lines of ones and zeros like in a Matrix movie.
Well, the perfect example, and I just did this morning, weirdly enough, I'm in a AI training class these 2 weeks for a whole bunch of reasons. But one of the things that kind of back to your, what it is that it uses to talk to us with, right? What is the language we force it on this communications path? It's the same. It's like that's the interface we're asking it to provide us at the end of the day. So the example I used this morning was ChatGPT, right? So we were asked, here's an article, analyze this article and come out with some findings. Well, what I did, throw it into ChatGPT. I'll go, here, analyze this article. I then went back and said, now analyze this article suitable for an engineer of this qualification. You get a totally different response, right? A different language that comes back with. Then I asked it for analyze this article in the context of a newspaper report, and it comes back with a different voice, right? You can tell the voice, you can ask for the voice that you want it back in. And then I asked it for analyze this article suitable for senior leadership of quote unquote certain company, right? And, too long didn't read and came in, and it was like 3 sentences and stuff like this. But I was asking the AI to come back in different voices, so you could in fact say the same thing. You could say, come back as a haystack on ontology for me. You could say, oh, come back with a more efficient ontology. That would be interesting.
Well, let's maybe look at this from a different point of view. What's the universal language of the universe? If ET was going to contact us, how would they contact us? Math, right?
Yeah.
What's the definition of a tensor? I just put it in the chat. It's a mathematical object, as in TensorFlow. So we already have the answer of how AI communicates. It's mathematics. So that's its strong point. Like literally you have token lengths and tokens and tensors and all this stuff. So we've already, and it's a mathematical representation of scalars, vectors, and matrices. That's what AI is built upon. So we already have the answer. Do you need ontology in math? Probably not.
But do you need metadata in addition to ontology?
Yes, I think
ultimately. I mean,
yes.
and to some extent, the ontology discussion we're having is also about how to get and arrange metadata along with that ontology. So I just want to point that out because I think it's the other thing I'm struggling with in this conversation is, we're throwing around AI without explaining it too well, which is why, Kate's example makes plenty of sense, right? He's got an optimization running. He doesn't need the help, right? But in a lot of these other cases, you not only need ontology, but you especially need metadata. Otherwise, if you're not providing enough inputs or enough data on a certain application, where's the AI supposed to get that data? Right?
Yeah. That's really, really valid.
Yeah. Agreed.
So where do we go from here?
Sorry, just to expand on that for a moment. So interesting enough, the other thing I learned this morning on this morning's training class, Jim, was a lot of like what ChatGPTs and DeepSeeks were trained on, of course, was everything out in the web, including Wikipedias and all this sort of stuff. In the context of doing that, one of the things they found was that we as humans were really, really good at providing a lot of metadata. When we threw up a picture of a banana on whatever, some screen, they used the banana as the example. I put a banana on the screen somewhere for some reason, right? It was in a grocery application or it was, describing a banana. It turns out we provided a lot of metadata about that banana in the process, right? Yellow ones, green ones, straight ones, bent ones, a whole bunch of metadata. So it had consumed all that metadata anytime it saw a thing about a banana as part of the thing. But that was because all that stuff existed out there on the internet. We're not as fortunate in our world, right? And not a lot of our stuff that metadata doesn't naturally kind of sort of sit. I mean, it's possible, and I've seen good models of if I get a nameplate of a machine, there's a lot of scraping that the machine will do to go out and get all the metadata associated with that particular model number version, which you and I could do, but it does at much better rate, of course. So
I think
that's
that-
the other bridge that I've seen, right, is that by getting minimalist data from the stuff that we've got, it's a Honeywell thermostat model XYZ, the AI will do a lot of scraping for metadata around that device.
I think I know
You
that's
don't
where
normally do.
I think I know that's where something Brian mentioned there earlier is about the actions that could come out with it if it's especially if it's integrated with things like BIM and let's just pick a chiller or whatever. If it knows it's a carrier chiller XYZ, that guess what they know, it already knows what the failure rates are on a particular part in that one as versus a York one or something else. And when that step starts coming in, it's going to be invaluable because the user can start picking his equipment and other stuff from that sort of data as well, which will be fascinating to see, what steps will come about once it's able to take those actions, and it should already be able to pick up all the data because it's already out there.
Yeah, I want to make one kind of go back to the Tiger team. My one observation, especially with respect to AI, is, and you guys know I started to normalize these ontologies, at least DBO and Haystack and Brick, and really starting to wonder, like, is there any value in putting human effort toward that effort of trying to normalize ontologies? This is something I believe AI will absolutely do and probably could do it very well right now. And that's an area where I think human effort in that regard is probably ill-suited. And I think that the 6 or 7 ontologies that were represented on Friday, plus the other 2 or 3 dozen that probably exist in different languages around the world, are probably going to be normalized by AI as soon as they're published. Just publish it and allow AI to have it in its library, and very quickly those things will be normalized. It won't matter whether it came from BIM or IFC or BDNS or OAP or Haystack or Brick, or it just won't matter. It'll figure out what all those things are and how to normalize them.
That was my starting point when I opened, that exact thinking, right? AI should be able to figure out a lot of this stuff on its own, or at least once you show it once, then it's good to go. I was thinking about that, and to this point, AI can think really fast and do things really fast, but without ontologies, it doesn't know what it's thinking about, right? So I think there will be, even if it's an evolved need, and what we look at as an ontology we're familiar with right now, it may be something evolved to something completely different, but there'll be underlying ontology to everything that it does in the future. It has to interpret it into something we understand.
Does
Is it at the point-
ontologies make AI more deterministic? Because one thing about AI is it's not really
I'm back in I think we are hamstringing it if we force ontologies on it. The metadata is important, don't get me wrong, what Jim was saying. The metadata is the key to this thing. But I think forcing ontologies on it, I think you're restricting it. I think you're putting chokeholds on it. It would be really interesting, by the way, if someone wants to take the time and effort to go take those 6 or 7 ontologies that were brought in and asked an AI to optimize them and see what it comes up.
Finally, we can get this done.
The other thing about, when you talk about these things is there's a model assumed, right?
Yeah.
And by forcing that assumed model, that may be a good thing or a bad thing in the long run, right? But potentially there are other models, right? An ontology often has an implicit model as to how you represent data. And by letting that be more free form, the AI might be able to do more with it. I think it's, for where we are now, I think it's all good.
So is the model then less important for AI than it is for us?
It would be less constrained.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's more important or less important.
Oh
I'm
my
not smart
gosh,
enough to
it's,
know
it's,
that.
it's critical. Like that model is everything in the AI. I
It's
mean,
a launching point,
yeah,
right?
it's how it understands the physical device that I mean, literally you're modeling it. So I mean, it's a model is nothing but a grouping of data points and information.
But do you agree, Keith, that ontology constrains that model in
It
some
does,
direction?
absolutely. Because if we knew how to optimize, I always say if we knew how to optimize a central plant, we wouldn't need the AI to help us. So one special thing I think about our technology is that unlike predictive or generative AI, we're not using a human trained model. The AI builds its own model and trains itself on its model. So it's unconstrained by these human limitations. Where's the model for running a chiller? We don't have that. We think we know how to run a chiller, but the AI discovers new and better ways to run a chiller. And so you're exactly right. That's the key right there. Let it build its own model, let it train itself on its own model, and get out of the way.
So isn't it true to say that sort of before AI, the way we think is that we're all sort of saying there should be one model so that we make it easier for us,
Exactly.
right? And now that there's AI, obviously there has to be, the model is important, but the need for there to be one model that we all understand and agree to is less important.
And Anto, that's the whole point of where's the ground truth in that? Like when you're training AI, it's always human trained. It's ground truth learning, right? Ground truth labeling. AI doesn't know out the box what a cat or a dog is. We have to train it. So we show 1,000 pictures or 1,000,000 pictures of a cat, and then hopefully it'll learn what a cat is. That's one model. Now we got another animal. There's a dog. Okay, AI, here's 1,000 or 1,000,000 pictures of a dog. That's two. We got 2 million more types of animals to go. And that's why this training compute is such a big deal. What if you let the AI build its own model and train itself? That's the interesting question.
Is AI at a point that it could build a digital twin
Well, I was
and
That's what we're doing.
return
is doing that. We're
and
not.
return the digital twin as the method of communication?
That's exactly what we're doing.
that's what Keith does. Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
exactly
but
what
I'm like, when you ask it a question, if that's the context, is in a digital twin world, can return me what would happen if I put in these inputs, and it'll come back and actually replay the digital twin. They can say that's something I want, or that's something I don't want.
That's the process. Here's these inputs. Here's all these variables. Make this number, which happens to be kW per ton, 0. It'll never get there, but it sure as hell is going to try to get there. It's just
Over and over again.
It's just a number.
Yeah.
It's a number cruncher.
It's a number great. Well, I mean, if you've seen the whole tokenization stuff that ChatGPT does, right? It takes everything you talk about and just tokenizes it into a number.
Yeah.
Just runs from there. After that, we got no visibility. It's just a number.
It's math.
They're just maths after that.
Lots and lots of
that's why
numbers.
you need the GPU power, and that's why you need the horsepower, because
if you're doing training compute, but if you're using inference compute like we are, we could run our stuff on a Raspberry Pi.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I always say, we're probably not going to get investment from NVIDIA anytime in the near future. We don't need it.
But I see an inherent issue here, which is that Keith's AI is running on a constrained problem, and he has that all set.
Very true.
And when it's general, we've got another issue. And one of the issues I have is that Keith controls his AI. If I'm using a large language model or something else, how do I know deterministically that the next generation of that model is going to converge on the same answer? And the answer is I don't.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons that in this intermediate period that we're in, that basically rules-based analysis and traditional stuff still needs to be around, because the dynamism of how those models are changing and the lack of determinism could get us into trouble at certain classes of problems, right?
Yeah. Our AI can't write a poem.
Right,
You can only run a chiller or an RTU
right. But that's what you sell.
for now.
I,
Exactly.
I know you sold records before, but
Yep.
didn't think you were selling poetry.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
I'm
Yeah,
still
that's it.
fascinated by someone taking all the 7 or 8 different ontologies and feeding it into a AI
Yeah.
and saying, come back and give me the most
Yes.
optimized ontology, please.
I think we need to go through that exercise.
It'd be fun. I mean,
Yeah.
when you think about it, at the end of the day, all those ontologies were created by really smart people who had a slightly different perspective of the world or where they were coming from, and created, all of them are quite relevant and valid. So can you now, what you've really got there at the moment is a distillation of a whole bunch of smart folks, right? So now go to the next level.
So let me just ask another question to the group here. If they've done such a beautiful job of standardizing ontologies and we can get AI to figure out what the right answer is, what about metadata? That metadata is also feeds into and is implicit on what the model is. It's related to the ontology. How do we standardize the delivery of metadata? Once again, it's sort of very localized as to what's important. So Keith knows that in his application, but if I'm doing something more general, how do I standardize, which is really part of this ontology project, whether the banana is green or whether it's bent,
Yeah, no, I think it's really relevant. I do wonder too, again, the banana's a great example of all the data that it's scraped for bananas. What percentage of that metadata was really, really relevant and the rest was just interesting but not useful?
Probably depends on the problem it's getting solved
Yeah,
at the
that's
moment.
true. That's a good point. Yeah. If you're trying to fit bananas into a bag, right, then if they're bent or whatever, might be a lot more relevant than if I'm trying to buy ripe ones.
I
Yeah.
think metadata is all a part of this, so, right?
Yeah.
Kind of connective tissue, almost.
Yeah. And data
I
analytics.
remember back in the early days of Lawn when we were talking about snivets and skipets and functional profiles, we used to try to come up with regular examples to explain some of that. But in this case, it still applies. If you look at a temperature and it says 72 degrees, you don't know anything unless you know, was that Fahrenheit or Celsius? What sensor reported it? What zone was it connected to and controlling? Where is it located? All of that kind of metadata that wraps around that value is what makes that data usable and understandable. Without it, you don't have anything but a number.
But is that not a mix between ontological information? Like you in your list, you talked about located somewhere, which sounds more like an ontological relationship.
A
rather than
zone is certainly part of an ontology, right? If you think of ontology like building, floor, room, zone,
right.
for instance. So yeah, they all interact. It's all part of a bigger picture that gets painted around the data. Data by itself without that contextual information is just that. All of this contextual information is what makes data understandable. And that's why all of this stuff in some form or another, it might not be called haystack or brick in the future, but there'll always be some kind of an ontology around all this stuff.
And
An
there's
ontology
another
and metadata
Yep.
standardization.
Taxonomy and so on and so forth.
And there's another classification, because we're talking about classification here. So there's another classification problem that has to happen, and that's what type of datum you're dealing with. So in our system, there's variables and there's goals. And that's it. So goals are outputs or outcomes, and variables, there's only 3 types. It's the same thing as in data analytics. It's a dependent variable, an independent variable, and a confounding variable. And that's it. So we take all the points, whatever they are, pieces of information, and they're classified according to variable type and outcome goals. And the AI uses the input variables as information to crunch on, and it outputs the goal, and it outputs an output control vector to meet the goal or goals. And it's infinite infinite number of variables, infinite number of outcomes, infinite number of goals, and they're prioritized. So I can say, I want to prioritize comfort over energy savings, or I can say I want lowest energy savings and then comfort, and stack on all this. It's an infinite list of variables. The column can't be too wide for AI. It's millions. And we're not even close. We have like maybe what, 10 to 20 per agent, I'll call it. It's not, but 10 to 20 multivariate problem at this scale is impossible for a human to understand. It's super easy for AI. Super easy.
Is the difference.
Guys, it's almost 4 o'clock. Trying to bring this back to how we started. Is the Tiger team effort that was started, do you feel like that's going to help drive this convergence of the different metadata standards to now add in ontological information, such that in the future we won't be talking about Haystack or Brick or the Google version? There'll be a new declaration of a way data is represented in buildings, and it will include all the ontological references. Is that what we're moving to?
I think it would have to be also include the metadata stuff. So in a way, it's not an ontological thing anymore. And maybe calling this the semantic tiger team is actually the best way of thinking about it, because these are all semantic issues.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? Am I right in my English saying that? This is all semantics, right?
Well,
Is
it rolls up
metadata
into-
essentially? Sorry.
It rolls up into an ontology. And again, to be able to create the math problem, you have to have an ontology, I believe.
But yes or no, are we going to, because we're spending all this time talking about this, and the Tiger team has now been kicked off, is the outcome of all this effort that's about to be deployed one where a year from now, or more or less, we're no longer going to be putting specs on the street that call for Haystack or Brick or any other tagging system? We're going to be talking about this new semantic model that includes all the tagging and the ontological relationships, all in this new thing called something. Right.
I guess,
That's what
Steve,
I'm asking.
I guess, Steve, it's going to depend upon who's going to champion using all this.
Yeah, I'm more skeptical than that. I would be. I think we're better off to trust that we can deploy an AI agent to just normalize it for us, after all the people that have their own desire about who's best puts it in. I think, and I don't think we have to wait a year. I think a couple of smart people with the AI engine and ingesting all of those open source models, it'll come out with, here's the normalized one, and you pick one, which one's your preference to see the outcome, and then you just choose it. And then you could also say, yeah, well, forget my preference, why don't you just give me the best one, like Tracy was saying, right? So it's just, I don't think trying to get humans to do the right thing at scale is the way to go.
But you said it earlier, a lot of these things aren't published yet.
Right.
A lot of these things are myths right now. And so there's this thought, or there's this impression that all this is published and it should be clear. And what's holding this up? It isn't published and it isn't clear. And that's one of the things the Tiger team is absolutely trying to reveal and to accelerate.
Yeah. So then you got to ask yourself, and all the public funds that are going out and all the private funds are going into these not yet published things, why are they doing it? I mean, I had this question when I was working for people on another one. Why are we doing this? Why aren't we extending Brick? Why aren't we extending Haystack? Why are we doing another one, right? And it ultimately came down to just they thought they had a better way.
Yeah.
And
Imagine that.
ultimately, I
Hitting
think,
end for the conversation.
yeah,
All right, we're
We're
YAS
not there.
standard. Right,
far.
YAS, that standard, yet another standard,
Yeah.
standard.
yeah, that comic continues to roll around every single time. Whether you put an API in there, ontology in there, that comic just keeps repeating itself.
All right, so let's bring this to a wrap. Thank you. This has been a great conversation. Thank you, Brian, for joining us. Thanks
you, guys.
everyone for being here. We'll get the video out hopefully in the next couple of days. Hope you all have a great week. Bye-bye.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.